Tuesday of the fifth week of Lent, we get a reading from the book of Numbers. And this is a reading where the Israelites are out in the desert complaining that they used to prefer the life that they had in Egypt as slaves. Things are too hard in the desert. Things were better as slaves in Egypt. This happens in our own hearts sometimes, right? Sometimes we think about our youth when we were more free to do whatever we wanted and all the fun sins we used to commit. And sometimes we wonder, what happened to me? I'm no more fun, you know? And we take for granted all of the grace that God has given us to mature and to become more the people that God made us to be. We forget that God has changed us and made us better. And we long for those old days when we used to have more fun somehow, right? So what happens is that God, in the Bible, God sends these seraph angels, sometimes described as fiery angels or fiery serpents, the seraph serpents. Seraph is singular, seraphim is the plural there, right? So you think of cherubim and seraphim, that's the plural. So the seraph angels, these fiery serpents, are meant to be purifying. For something to be fiery means that it purifies. If you're going to purify water, you have to have a fire underneath it. If you're going to purify your food, you have to cook it with fire. If you're going to cauterize a wound and keep it from getting infected, right, you use fire to do that. So fire had this purifying effect. So God was angry, and in his wrath, he sends the solution, and it's this fiery serpent. And it seems to be more than the people could handle. So they turn to Moses, and they say, Moses, intercede for us. We have sinned. Intercede for us. And Moses does. And so God says, okay, here's the better remedy, better than the fiery serpents. Just put a serpent on a pole. So Moses makes a bronze serpent. And if people look at it, they will be healed. This is the crucifix. The crucifix that we know as that little piece of jewelry that so many people wear, right, is really meant for us to look at Christ on the cross and be purified by that. Rather than have God purify us by going through all of the crucifixions of life and suffering in the worst kind of ways, now we can look at that crucifix and we can say, Lord, if it's not your will that I suffer so much, I can be purified just by looking at the crucifix. Just by gazing at the cross, I come to understand who I am, what I'm made for, what it means to lay down your life for others. And if you call me to that, I'm willing to do it. If you call me to the cross, I'm willing to carry it. But if you're not, I might escape simply by uniting my own personal struggles that I already carry around, uniting those to the crucifix, uniting those to the cross of Christ. And somehow in all of that, I will be purified. I will be made better by that cross, by the sufferings of Christ on the cross, that he is, in a sense, suffering something so that we can take our lesser sufferings and unite them to Christ on the cross and live the way that God called us to live. That's the plan of salvation. The prosperity gospel, so-called prosperity gospel, is not for us. That gospel that says, if you believe in Jesus, you'll get that boat that you always wanted and those fine cars that you always wanted, the job that you wanted, the house you wanted. That's not the gospel for us. The gospel for us cannot be separated from Christ on the cross and our own identification with it. As we get closer and closer to those hard days of Good Friday, we should let ourselves unite ourselves to that cross without fear, get closer and closer to it and recognize its purifying power and let it do its work. Amen.